Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Markar B1921 US2G full surface reinforcing pivot for flush doors when you have a 4-inch hinge that's been installed. So this comes in a few different components, and I'd like to show them all to you now. First, you've got the portion here that's going to be acting as the door portion. Okay, it's going to look like that. And just to dissect the part number a little bit, the B1921 means that it's for a 4-inch hinge. If you have a 4.5-inch hinge, which is by far more common, it would be the B1923. Quite frankly, don't order this one unless you're sure you need it, because a 4-inch hinge is pretty unusual where you would need a reinforcing pivot like this. So, what you have here is the door portion, and then you've got the header portion here. Okay. Let me put a tape measure on these parts before we move forward, just so you have an idea of what you're dealing with. This is again the door portion, about 4 3/8. Overall length looks like it's about 5 5/16. Overall height, probably eyeball that there at about inch and 3/4, inch and 11/16. Now the header portion, that has an overall width of 6 1/4. Okay, an overall height, inch and 3/4. Okay. You're going to get a package of screws, and we'll go over all that in a moment. So where you use these is in a situation where you have, and I've assembled it, by the way, your header portion and your door portion, and this pin rests up into that bushing that's there. The design of this, as you can probably see, is such that it can be reversible. So if I were to remove this pin, put it over here, okay, remove that pin, put it over here, then I would sit here. So as we're looking at this now, obviously this door is going to be a left-hand reverse from your perspective. If you're standing on the pull side, which you would be, which would be the key side in this example, okay, it'd be a left-hand reverse, or it could be a right hand as well if the key was on my side. And obviously if we were going to reverse that around, you know, you'd be dealing with the opposite hand. These pieces of hardware are used very commonly when a top hinge preparation in a door or a frame or both has failed, meaning the weld has failed. It's very common for that to occur in high-frequency sorts of applications where a door will be opened a lot to a great frequency, or even some abuse, obviously. The hinge at the top of the door, compared to the other 2 or 3 hinges or whatever it might be, takes all the majority of work. The most of the weight is below that hinge. It does the majority of keeping the door, you know, hung. The middle hinge kind of does some of it. The bottom hinge, he's just, you know, he's just there. The top hinge does all the work, really, or most of the work, which is evidenced by wear patterns that you'll see on hinge knuckles, gaps that you'll see between a door and a frame at the top versus the bottom. That door wants to get away from that hinge and that frame, and it does so most obviously at the top hinge. This piece of hardware, this 4-inch version, and its much more common 4.5-inch version, save the day in the sense that you can get that door shimmed back up to where it needs to be, abandon in place that broken hinge, or remove it altogether. And it's really the spot welds that will fail in a steel door, steel frame situation. And I think that I don't know that hollow metal manufacturers take into account whatsoever the fact that a top hinge should be reinforced additionally or with thicker steel or both. I know that I can think of at least one that doesn't. The hinge plates are welded in, and it's the same all the way down the door. That top hinge takes all the work. So this, again, back to this full surface reinforcing pivot, or it's a reinforcing pivot is what it is. There's really no other term for it that I would use. Saves the day in the sense that it allows you to continue to get useful service out of that door and frame. Replacing a door is one thing. Replacing a frame could be a completely more different situation to contend with, especially when it comes to labor. If you have to remove a steel frame from a block or brick mortared concrete in situation, you might look for a relatively inexpensive piece of hardware like this and keep that door working. You could double the life expectancy of the door at that point. Installation of this is in theory very, very easy. You know, basically you've got 4 holes for the header, you've got 4 holes for the door. It comes with a nifty little template that really couldn't make it any easier. This template is completely reversible by just doing this. You can even see through it that you can make that work. Line this up with the underside of the head, line this up with the hinge edge. This is going to margin to the inside corner of the frame, so you would apply this to the frame. You can tape it down, whatever. I'd like to get it secure onto the frame and then use a center punch and center punch all my holes really good, so that when I go to pre-drill my holes, my drill bit's not walking at all. You don't want these holes to be misaligned, because it's utterly critical, speaking more about the templating now, it's utterly critical that the axis of pivoting of this lug that's here is plumb with the axis of pivoting of the existing hinges. Otherwise your door is not going to work correct. It will be hinge bound somehow. So getting this templated correctly is really ideal. And by all means, you know, maybe put in 1 screw or drill only 1 hole and test it. Make sure that you've got nice smooth operation, although be very careful because your door is probably tipped and you probably have it shimmed in place at this point. Once you've got the header portion up, you can go ahead and you know, get this door portion lined up and use your center punch to mark those holes and continue on. There is a link below this video to the instructions that you want to review, and I want to go over them, quite frankly. Going over the changing of the hand of this hinge is page 1 of the instructions in the template, and it's also obvious that I don't think we'll beleaguer any of those points on simply moving this to the other side should it be necessary. So we won't cover any of that. We're just going to move right to page 2 on this. So locate step 1, locate the pivot on the frame. Hold your combination square and corner of frame and place the template against the square exactly as shown. So what they're saying is don't rely on the inside of the frame really as a good judge in terms of where to lay this template. This template's a 90-degree angle. Your combination square will be a 90-degree angle. They're going to want you to put that onto the jamb, make sure it's square into the header, and then line your template up to that, because, again, the axis of pivoting needs to be plumb. It can't be, you know, any other, you know, sort of condition. It has to be plumb, and that will help you achieve that. Maybe we're overthinking it a little bit. However, if you've got a door closer on a door, you know, you don't want to present any additional obstacles to that hydraulic closer doing its job, and it doesn't take much to prevent a door closer from closing the door. Step 2, drill the holes required per the schedule, meaning per the template. They give you specific sizes to drill. You know, they're giving you a number 7 drill for a 1/4 machine screw. Obviously, if you're going to have a drill and tap, if you buy that set, if you have that set, you'll have a, I don't know, 13/64. Don't quote me on that, but it's very close to that. Word to the wise here. When I said earlier that in theory this is easy to install, it's easy to install if you don't have a frame packed with concrete. If you do, that's going to be tough. You'll have to pre-drill your hole. You'll have to figure out a way to get the concrete inside of there. hollowed out so that you can attach this. And just a little aside, and I do not recommend it from a perspective of someone who would install these for clients, and do so by a means by which a person makes a living. But I've got some customers who slap these up and just weld them to the door and frame. Here in Chicago, in the West Loop, you got a lot of condo buildings, you got a lot of people that are running businesses, hot and heavy, fast and furious, quick turnaround. Everything's got to be done quick and inexpensively, as it does in a lot of places. So I've got some customers who've done a lot of nightclubs, and they'll just put them up there, and the guy says, get it on there. I don't care, just get it on there. And they'll just weld it and be done with it and walk away, and it works great. Having gone to a job site to replace one of these because of damage, a truck backing into it, I can't get that off easily if it's been welded on. I want to be able to repeat the process. So if you're a guy making a living, maybe drill and tap. Or if you're a guy making a living, you can just as easily grind that right off and weld another one too, I suppose. So, for whatever that's worth. Drill your holes. Step 3, with the door in place, check to be sure that the hinges are firmly attached and there is proper clearance between the door and frame at all sides, including the bottom of the door. If door tends to sag away from hinge jamb at top, drive wedges between the frame and the door at the opposite side and realign the hinges until the door is properly positioned to swing free. So what they're saying is, before you get this portion attached to the door, make sure you're plumb, make sure you've got good margin all the way around the door. Okay, and once you do, go to step 4. Place door portion of pivot with pivot in place on the door and move into position such that the pin enters the bronze bushing. When properly aligned with lower part marking like contact with the bearing flange, hold firmly in place, parallel with head of door, and mark your holes, and then go about your business attaching them. Now, the business of attaching them for the door, nice from Markar, includes through bolts, which would be appropriate because the gauge of a metal door itself without reinforcement is not adequate to drill and tap to. Certainly, is something that needs to be through bolted. And of course, these being through bolts, they're intended specifically for an 1 3/4 door, meaning that when you put this through the door on the push side, this inside shoulder is going to hit the inside face of the outside skin, so that when you tighten the screw down, it won't crush the door in because you've got that bolt to the specific length. Okay, these I believe are 3/8 holes. Yeah, 3/8 holes for the sex bolt, and then you'll have machine screws for that there. Actually, you've got you ought to have, yeah, you've got 2, 4, 6. You've got enough machine screws to do the top and the bottom. Okay. You'll certainly, if it's a metal door, you'll certainly use them at the bottom. If it's a wood door and frame, which it wouldn't really be a wood frame, but you've got wood screws there as well. So speaking of frames, you're going to obviously want to make sure that you've got enough room up at the top here for this. And we measured this earlier, so if you've got a steel frame that's got less than a 2-inch face on it, you might want to lay that out and make sure that you're in good shape. And then the final page of this, that link to the instructions and template is just a scan of this template. It's obviously not going to be to scale, but nonetheless, that's what you're dealing with. I'm a big fan of these, even though you could make an argument, I suppose, that they're not pretty to look at. But, it's also not pretty to spend $1,000 just to replace a frame in that regard, I suppose. I'm a big fan of these, like I've said multiple times now. What makes this really different than the 4.5-inch version, the B1923, is the distance from the face of the door to the center line of the pivot is going to be specifically intended for a 4-inch wide hinge, and that dimension is 1/2 inch. If you had a 4.5-inch hinge, you can do the math there and realize that pivot that axis of pivoting would need to be further out because you've got a 4.5-inch hinge. Cutting that in half when the hinge is closed, you got a 1/4 inch, so that would make the offset from the face of the door to the center line 3/4 inch on a 4.5-inch. Markar, full line manufacturer of all things commercial, hardware related as it pertains to doors, continuous hinges. They have a full line of metal vision frames, and they're incorporated under the umbrella of Asa Abloy. good quality people. I bought from the company that I bought from the original company back in the mid-1990s, before they were bought by Markar, before Markar was bought by Assa Abloy, or however that all occurred. But what I like about Markar is that they maintained the dedication to excellent technical customer service that they had almost 20 years ago, in my experience. And it's a pleasure to sell their material. If you have any questions on this, B1921 reinforcing pivot for 4-inch hinges, or any other Markar product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.